What happens when a joke goes too far and the one you thought was powerless turns the tables? I never expected to be handed official court papers at my own front door, papers that changed my life and made me realize my harmless birthday prank wasn't so harmless after all. The restaurant buzzed with conversation as I adjusted my red dress and checked my reflection in my phone camera. Tonight was Simon's 36th birthday, and I had plans to make it memorable. Not just for him, but for his uptight parents who always looked at me like I was something they'd scraped off their shoe. Eluned, you look beautiful, Simon said, straightening his tie nervously. He always got anxious around his parents, which honestly annoyed me. At 34, I wasn't about to tiptoe around anyone, especially not June and Walter Ellis. Thanks, babe, I replied, barely glancing at him. I was too busy watching his parents across the restaurant. June sat ramrod straight in her navy blazer, her gray hair pulled into that same boring bun she'd worn for probably 20 years. Walter fidgeted with his glasses, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. My sister Tessa leaned over from her seat. You're plotting something, aren't you? I can see that look in your eyes. Just planning to liven things up, I whispered back with a grin. Someone needs to show these people how to have fun. The waiter appeared with our appetizers, and I saw my opening. Standing up slightly, I raised my wine glass. I'd like to make a toast to the birthday boy and his wonderful family. Everyone looked up expectantly. Simon's face showed a mix of hope and terror. He knew me well enough to be worried. At work, I threw myself into a new marketing campaign, trying to push the previous night out of my mind. But every time I checked my phone, I hoped for a text from Simon. Instead, I got one from my mother. Tessa told me what happened. I'm sure Simon's parents deserved whatever you said. They've never appreciated you. Leave it to Mom to take my side no matter what. Karen Morrow had never liked Simon, claiming he was too boring for me. She'd been thrilled when I started getting attention from other men, though she didn't know about Dane specifically. Around lunch, I decided to stop by Brew and Bean. Dane was working the day shift, and the place was nearly empty. How are you feeling today? He asked as he made my usual latte. Like everyone's overreacting to a harmless joke. Is that really what you think it was? I studied his face. You're different today. Last night you seemed more understanding. I've been thinking about what you told me, about Simon, about his parents, about everything. He handed me my coffee, and our fingers brushed. The familiar spark was there, but something else too. Something that looked almost like pity. What's that supposed to mean? Maybe you should go home and talk to your husband, Eluned. Really talk to him. I don't want to talk about Simon right now. Then what do you want to talk about? Us. This. Whatever this is between us. Dane glanced around the empty cafe and leaned closer. What about us? You're married. You have a kid. I'm just the guy you come to when you need to feel better about yourself. His words stung because they held more truth than I wanted to admit. That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my life, my problems, my goals? This whole thing is about you feeling trapped and me being your escape route. Before I could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Henderson from down the street walked in. I quickly stepped back from the counter, my face burning. "Hello, Eluned dear," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How's Simon doing? I heard you all had quite the celebration last night." Word traveled fast in our small town. "It was lovely, thank you." "I'm sure it was. Please give him my regards." I left without finishing my conversation with Dane, feeling more unsettled than ever. That evening, Simon came home late from work. He kissed Mila goodnight and helped her with her homework, but he barely acknowledged me. "How was your day?" I asked as he loaded the dishwasher. "Fine." "Simon, we need to talk about last night." "Do we? Because I've been thinking about it all day, and I'm not sure there's much to say." "What's that supposed to mean?" He turned to face me, and I was surprised by the coldness in his eyes. "It means I'm tired, Eluned. I'm tired of making excuses for you, tired of apologizing to people for your behavior, tired of pretending that what you did was okay. One joke at a birthday dinner and suddenly I'm the worst person in the world? It wasn't one joke. It's been building for months. The comments, the eye rolls, the way you talk about my family when they're not around. Last night was just the final straw. I felt panic rising in my chest. Simon had never talked to me like this before. So, what are you saying? I'm saying I need some time to think. About what? About whether this is working anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. So, you're having an affair? Rachel asked, her eyes wide. It's not really an affair. We haven't. I mean, we're just friends who have feelings for each other. Girl, that's definitely an affair. The physical stuff is just a technicality. Simon doesn't understand me anymore. All he cares about is work and keeping his parents happy. When's the last time he made me feel special? But you're married. You have a daughter. I know that, but I can't help how I feel. Rachel looked conflicted, like she wanted to be supportive but wasn't sure this was the right thing to support. The evening ended with me feeling more confused than ever. Part of me was thrilled by Dane's attention and the validation from some of my coworkers, but another part of me felt hollow, like I was performing a role instead of living my life. When I got home, Simon was already asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching him in the dim light from the hallway. He looked peaceful, younger somehow, and I felt a pang of something that might have been regret. But then I remembered how he'd dismissed my feelings about his parents, how he'd made me feel like the villain for standing up for myself. The regret faded, replaced by familiar resentment. I grabbed my phone and texted Dane. Thanks for tonight. It was exactly what I needed. This time, he responded immediately. Anytime. You deserve to be happy. I fell asleep with my phone in my hand, Dane's words echoing in my mind. The next morning, I woke up to find Simon already dressed and drinking coffee in the kitchen. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well, but there was something different about his posture, more resolved maybe. Good morning, I said tentatively. Morning. He didn't look up from his phone. Simon, about last night? Where were you last night? The question caught me off guard. I told you, work happy hour at Martini's. Until midnight? I felt a chill run down my spine. We lost track of time. You know how these things go. Simon finally looked at me, and his expression was unreadable. Do I? What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I have to get to work early today. Can you take Mila to school? Of course, but Simon? We'll talk later, Eluned, I promise. Something in his tone made me nervous, but I couldn't put my finger on what had changed. At work, I tried to focus on my projects, but I kept thinking about Simon's strange mood. Around lunch, Jennifer called me into her office. Close the door, please, she said, and my stomach dropped. Is everything okay? I wanted to talk to you about last night. Some of the things you shared at happy hour have me concerned. What things? About your marriage, about this other man you mentioned. Eluned, I consider you a friend, but I also have to think about the company's reputation. I don't understand. Office gossip travels fast. If you're having marital problems, that's your business. But when you discuss your personal life in detail with coworkers, especially when it involves potential infidelity, it reflects poorly on all of us. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. I was just venting to friends. I know, and I understand the impulse, but you need to be more careful about what you share and with whom. This is a small company, and people talk. Are you firing me? Of course not. I'm just asking you to use better judgment going forward. Keep your personal life personal, especially while you're figuring things out at home. I left Jennifer's office feeling humiliated and angry. How dare people judge me for having feelings, for being human? I'd worked hard for this company, and now they were treating me like some kind of liability. I spent the rest of the day avoiding eye contact with my coworkers, wondering who had reported back to Jennifer and what exactly they'd said. When I got home, Simon was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. He looked up when I walked in, and his expression was calm but serious. "Where's Mila?" I asked. "At my parents' house. I picked her up from school and took her over there." "Why?" "Because we need to have a conversation, and I didn't want her to overhear." Simon gestured for me to sit down across from him. The folder remained closed, but I could see papers inside it. "What's this about, Simon?" "It's about our marriage, about what's been happening, and about what happens next." "You're scaring me." "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to be honest with you, maybe for the first time in months." He opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. I could see credit card statements, phone records, and what looked like printed screenshots. "I know about Dane," he said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "I know about the coffee shop meetings, the late-night texts, the charges on your credit card. I know you were with him last night after your work event." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Simon, I can explain." "Can you?" 3 days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and anxious phone calls. Mila was staying with Simon's parents, and despite my protests, Simon insisted it was temporary until we resolved things. I tried calling him dozens of times, but he only answered when it was about practical matters: Mila's school pickup, her doctor's appointment, her soccer practice. I'd also tried reaching out to Dane, but he'd made it clear that he was done being caught in the middle of my marriage drama. "Figure out your life, Eluned," he'd said during our last phone call. "I can't be your escape route anymore." Even Tessa was being distant. When I'd called her crying about Simon's ultimatum, she'd listened politely, but hadn't offered the unconditional support I was used to. "Maybe he has a point," she'd said carefully. "Maybe you do need to take a step back and think about what you really want." "I want my family back." "Do you? Or do you just want things to go back to the way they were, where you could do whatever you wanted without consequences?" Now I was sitting in my empty house on a Friday evening, surrounded by the silence that had become my constant companion. I'd ordered Chinese takeout and opened a bottle of wine, trying to work up the courage to call Simon and tell him I was ready to do whatever it took to save our marriage. But before I could dial his number, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Simon's sedan, and my heart leapt with hope. Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe he'd realized that breaking up our family over a few mistakes was an overreaction. Simon walked in without knocking, carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. He looked professional, detached. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "You're just upset that you got caught." With that, he walked out, leaving me alone with the divorce papers and the wreckage of my marriage. I spent the next hour calling everyone I could think of: Tessa, my mother, even Rachel from work. But no one seemed surprised by Simon's decision. Even my mother, who had always taken my side in everything, seemed subdued. "Maybe this is for the best, honey," she said finally. "Maybe you both need a fresh start." "Mom, he's taking Mila away from me." "He's not taking her away. He's making sure she's in a stable environment while you figure things out." "Whose side are you on?" "I'm on your side, always. But I'm also thinking about my granddaughter. She needs peace and stability, not parents who are constantly fighting." After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and finally allowed myself to cry. Not the manipulative tears I'd used so many times to get my way, but real, honest grief for what I'd lost and what I'd thrown away. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at my door. It was a process server with official copies of Simon's divorce filing. As I signed for the papers, I saw Mrs. Henderson from down the street watching from her yard, and I realized that soon everyone in town would know about my public humiliation. But as I closed the door and looked at the legal documents in my hands, I realized something that surprised me. I felt relieved. For months, I'd been living a lie, pretending to be happy in my marriage while pursuing something else entirely. Now, at least everything was out in the open. I still had to face the consequences: the custody battle, the financial uncertainty, the social embarrassment. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. Simon had called my bluff and he'd won. The joke was definitely on me.